Good evening. I want to welcome you to this webinar, Writing a Great Comparative Essay. And we'll get started. My name is Tom Bruner. I'm a Liberty University online instructor in the College of General Studies, and we're going to be discussing tonight writing a comparative essay, which is about 2/3 of the way through the course. The assignment finds itself in week 6 of the 8-week version of the course, and between weeks 11 and 13 in the 16-week, 15 and 16-week versions of the course. This webinar is for Liberty University Online students enrolled in Physical Science 210, and I'll be going through a PowerPoint presentation this evening. So this is what we'd like to cover. I'd like to introduce the topic tonight of writing a comparative essay, what that is and what it entails. In part 1, we'll review formatting for writing a formal written paper submitted as an essay for this course. In part 2, we'll discuss picking a topic, which is an opportunity you will have before beginning the process of writing the paper. In part 3, we'll talk about the components of your paper, the 3 main components, the introduction, body, and conclusion. In part 4, we'll discuss references and then hopefully anticipate some questions from you at the end here. So I'd like to introduce the webinar tonight by discussing the writing of an essay. It's not always easy. You're all ready to write, but you don't know how to exactly start. And then sometimes starting is the hardest part, as Snoopy is discovering here, or this person who has writer's block, this person who had something down but didn't like it, and then had something else down and didn't like it. So writing is hard work. Someone once said, thoughts are clarified out the lips and through the fingertips. So what is a comparative essay? Well, you're comparing 2 things that are different. A comparison is made between 2 or more items, and for this assignment, you're comparing 2 theories or 2 hypotheses or models or ideas that explain the origin of not really astronomical but geological features. In this comparative essay, you will consider both the similarities and differences, compare and contrast. And you'll discuss the nature of the comparison as it relates to the reliability of scientific and biblical evidence that is presented in support of each. And then finally, references from experts in the field are critical to a good essay. So let's review formatting. For this particular essay, most importantly, you want to submit your paper as a Microsoft Office Word document. Now, Word is part of Office 365 and is free and available at no charge to LUO students. So make sure you go to Liberty's IT Marketplace and download the latest version of Microsoft Office 365 to your computer. And that way you'll be, file formats will end in DocX, that's the newer version. And you'll have all of the newest features available in Word as well. Do not use iOS Pages, Apple's program for word processing. Do not submit your paper as a PDF document, Adobe, or another program that file ending ends in PDF. And do not submit it as a text file, and do not use the Blackboard box to paste your content into. So for your comparative essay, here are just a few reminder APA formatting tips. This is actually week 6, not week 7 here. But there are week 6 it should be, and I don't think it's correct for week 14 for the the longer versions of the course. But anyway, the week that the assignment is due, there are some tips for proper APA formatting, and you can look at that presentation. But here are a few reminders. Make sure you have a correct cover page. Their instructions are very detailed. The running head needs to be there, APA formatting, running head at the top, your title, abbreviated title, like 3 or 4 word title at the most, abbreviated title in all caps, and then make sure you have, when you write your paper, you use in-text citations when referring to an author, and then also you need a reference page at the end, and the title of the reference page is References. So tip number 1 in correctly formatting your paper, take time to put together a correctly formatted APA cover page. That's the first thing your instructor will see, and he'll be looking, or she'll be looking for your name and his name or her name as the instructor, or and the date and the section number and the course name, all those things that are specifically mentioned in the instructions. Tip number 2, headings. There are 6 headings for the comparative essay, and each heading should be considered a level 1 heading, which means it should be centered and bold-faced and should not contain any Roman numerals or outline lettering of any kind. It just should stand alone as itself. So here are the 6 headings required for this paper: Introduction, Older Secular View, Young Earth View, Comparison of the Viewpoints, Contrast of the Viewpoints, and the Conclusion. Tip number 3, remember to include a bibliography or reference page with at least 4 sources. Now, the other requirement of these sources is that 2 must be from the Old Earth view and 2 must be from the Young Earth view. Please do not use a creation source, a supposed creation source by an author named Kaspersky, because he actually appears as a Young Earth proponent, but he's actually an Old Earth proponent writing about the Young Earth view. Also, you may certainly use your Bible and course text, but those 2 sources do not count toward the 4 required sources. So you will need to find 4 sources. Let me point you to a couple of good sources for that. Within the reading and study folder of the module that the comparative essay is due is a presentation on using the JFL, the Jerry Falwell Library, online resources there. So that is an excellent resource, and view that presentation so that you can correctly access those sources. For the Old Earth view, anything that's .gov or .edu is fine. NASA is a good source as well. Again, these would be presenting the Old Earth view. But for the Young Earth view, it's sometimes hard to find reliable, excellent material. So let me point you to 2 websites. One is ICR.org, Institute for Creation Research. Their website is ICR.org. And the other is AnswersInGenesis.org. And those 2 websites, Answers in Genesis and Institute for Creation Research, have excellent material that presents the Young Earth view. Tip number 4, proofread your paper. Proofreading is takes a little bit of work, but it will help. And let me point you to a resource that's available through the university, a free assessment of your comparative essay from a Liberty graduate student. This is available to all of you for free. It's part of your part of the services that are available for you as a Liberty student. And this particular resource is called the Liberty Online Writing Center, the OWC, we sometimes refer to it. The Online Writing Center is the page on Liberty's website where you can submit your paper for review, and you'll get it back with comments and suggestions and corrections, and that will help with the writing of your paper if you choose that resource. Submit your paper to the OWC at least 4 days before the assignment due date, and you will receive a free tutor-reviewed assessment of your essay within 48 hours. Tip number 5, this one is very common students writing papers, is they fall into the use of first and second person. I, you, me, my, we, us. So avoid use, do not use first or second person. It's really not necessary, and it shouldn't be personal. You're writing about a topic. Tip number 6, the length of the paper needs to be 1,000 words. And so most instructors I know are very careful to check this word count, not counting the cover page and the bibliography, of course. And changing the margins doesn't help because word count is independent of that. So typically with a correctly formatted paper, which is 1-inch margins, and the use of headings, and using Times New Roman 12-point font, this is typically about 3 1/3 pages for 1,000 words. Tip number 7, use correct parenthetical and in-text citations. Parenthetical would be a quote. Common parenthetical citation is at the end of the quote. So if you quote a source, make sure you put their name in parentheses with publication date at the end, separated by a comma. When you're paraphrasing or referring to a work or a source, when citing a single work by a single author, the author's name within the text, and the name appears following the author in parentheses. So if you're talking about Martin, who wrote about the Old Earth View, then you would just simply follow his name with parentheses, and that tells your reader that that's the source that you're referring to. All right, tip number 8, avoid plagiarism. Of course, this is a serious infraction, and it's part of the honor code for Liberty University students. So do not cite or refer or use content that is not in your own words. And so you can view what plagiarism is from a number of sources. But one of the ways we check for plagiarism at Liberty is through this source, this tool here called SafeAssign. And SafeAssign is a program that when you submit a paper to Blackboard, it checks it against all other, let me go back to that for a second. It checks your paper against all other written assignments submitted to the university. So it's impossible probably to write a paper without some phrases being similar to others or being identical to others. But when the SafeAssign percentages start getting higher than 30%, 25, 30%, 40%, 50%, then that's an alert to a teacher. And so the way to avoid a high SafeAssign report number is simply to write the paper in your own words. Rephrase sentences. When you are referring to a source, make sure you cite that source as an in-text citation. And if you're quoting a source, then make sure you have a citation included. So you're always covering for yourself when you use the in-text and parenthetical citations. Tip number 9, always indent the first line of a new paragraph. And in our modern era with social media and emails, we usually don't indent. But in formal writing, APA formatting, this is a requirement. And finally, number 10, do not write about old earth creationism. Old earth creationism is really a combination between the old earth view and the young earth view, and incorporates both. It's rejected by both sides, but there are many attempts to explain the Bible and the old earth view in one theory. The gap theory would be an example. But this paper, do not write about old earth creationism. That's a different view entirely. So you're writing about the old earth secular view or naturalistic view, in contrast or in comparison, in contrast to the young Earth view, the biblical young Earth view with scientific evidence. Miscellaneous things to avoid: contractions, don't, can't, wouldn't, hyperbole, dramatic strong language, hyperbole, exaggeration, rhetorical questions, questions that only have one answer, and then slang, idioms. Those are fine for other forms of communication, but not in a comparative essay. All right, let's move on to part 2. We're done with formatting. Covered a lot of details there. Let's move on to part 2. Picking a topic. What are you interested in? Well, here are some choices for you. Make sure you read the instructions carefully for the assignment. And after you've read the instructions, here are the choices that you'll be given. Choose one of the following. Choose one of the following topics for your comparative essay: the age of the Earth, the origin of coal, dating of the rock layers seen in the Grand Canyon, the fossil record, and mass extinctions. Now, each of those particular views, each of those particular historical views has an old Earth view and a young Earth view. For example, for the age of the Earth, there's radioisotope dating, which is the evidence that the method that's used to support the old Earth view. And there's alternative methods. For the origin of coal, the old Earth view is swamp forests, and then the young Earth view is marine deposition. For the dating of rock layers seen in the Grand Canyon, there's the old Earth view, uniformitarianism, millions of years. And then there's the young Earth view, catastrophic formation of these rock layers caused by the flood during and after Noah's flood, the global flood. And then number 4, the fossil record. There's the old Earth view of long periods of time, millions, hundreds of millions of years, and versus short periods of time, years for the fossil record to have been formed. And then number 5, mass extinctions in the fossil record. That's related to the previous one, but you're focusing just on mass extinctions. And does this seem to indicate old Earth or young Earth, these particular rock layers where we see large numbers of fossils together? All right, so those are your 5 topics. In choosing a topic, avoid writing about old Earth creationism, which we already mentioned. Avoid writing on a topic related to but not one of the 5 topics listed. So if you're writing, say, about radioisotope dating, you're talking about dating old rocks. Don't write about carbon dating, which is used to date younger archaeological artifacts usually, although the carbon-14 dating method does apply to some degree to the dating of rocks when we discuss diamonds. And coal. And then avoid writing on one or more than one topic. Sometimes students jump around and they're writing about biological evolution and then writing about the rocks in the Grand Canyon. So stick with one of those topics, the old Earth and young Earth views of just one topic. All right, let's discuss in detail these topics. And now hopefully a choice is beginning to form in your mind which of these you're going to choose. Topic number 1, the age of the Earth. How old is the Earth? Well, the old Earth view relies on radiometric dating. The young Earth view actually undermines the reliability of radiometric dating by stating the assumptions that are required for this method to work. But then let me go back here. The young Earth view also discusses other dating methods. There are other ways of dating the Earth, and the young Earth view does incorporate those as well. One more time, let me just discuss a couple of those. For example, the decay of the Earth's magnetic field is one of the geochronological devices that young Earth creationists will refer to in discussing the age of the Earth. The amount of salt in the ocean, the amount of meteoric dust on the moon, the number of craters. There's a number of things that are looked at that could be potential dating methods. And so the young Earth view looks at alternative dating methods. So you're going to compare and contrast the reliance of radioisotope dating by the old Earth view with the young Earth view. All right, that's topic number one. Topic number two, origin of coal. Did coal have its origin in the swamp forests of the Carboniferous period, or was coal formed by Noah's flood and marine deposition? So here we have the kind of typical origin of coal environment, and here we have Dr. Austin, Steve Austin, at Mount St. Helens on the newly formed Spirit Lake with tens of thousands of logs that became a literal floating mat on this lake. So here's a kind of a micro laboratory for coal origin that he discusses. So these are two opposing views, old Earth view, the young Earth view. Topic number three, dating the rock layers seen in the Grand Canyon, the old Earth versus the young Earth. So these rock layers here, thousands of feet thick of sedimentary rock layers, one on top of another, relatively parallel to one another, the Kaibab Plateau up here capping things off, Kaibab Formation, and all the way down at the bottom, the Vishnu schist and the rock that preceded all of these rock layers of the Grand Canyon. So did these rock layers form slowly over time, over hundreds of millions of years, or was there a global flood that caused these rock layers to form quickly, rapidly? And there's evidence, quite a bit of evidence, that's presented from both views. And then number four, the fossil record. It's really amazing how many fossils are visible to us, and we're just looking at the surface. So just about anybody can find a place where there are fossils nearby where they live, and they can go out and dig around and find some fossil shells or maybe even some fossil fish. And that's just what's available at the surface. And think of what's available. Think of how many fossils are underneath. So did these fossils simply get buried according to the uniformitarian view over millions and hundreds of millions of years? Or did these fossils get buried rapidly by a catastrophic event, such as the global flood? Long periods of time versus short periods of time. And then finally, related to the previous one, mass extinctions in the fossil record. So there are 3 or 4 major mass extinctions in the periods where many species went extinct. So we're looking here at trilobite fossils, which were flourished and alive during the Cambrian period. And now we don't see any trilobites anymore. They're completely disappeared as far as we know. And trilobites went extinct. And so here's a layer of rock that seemed to have buried a number of them relatively quickly, suddenly, very close together. So what caused this? There's an old Earth view, and there's a young Earth view. What is the evidence for this having happened quickly versus it having happened slowly over millions, hundreds of millions of years? And then let's wrap up our comparative essay this evening by discussing quickly what your paper is going to look like. Typically, we refer to an essay as having an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. For our introduction, you're going to use your first heading, introduction, at the start of it. And this section should be brief, introducing your reader to your topic, presenting a thesis statement. Here are 2 different views, and we'll compare them, and we'll contrast them, and we'll be looking at the evidences for these views. Avoid using quotes in the section or references to sources. The information should be general enough for you simply to whet the appetite of your reader and dive into the next section. So that next section is the body of the essay. So these are your 4 headings that will be in the body of the essay. It will begin with the older secular view, and you will discuss the naturalistic old earth, non-biblical or abiblical view of the topic you chose, and then moving on to the young earth view and the comparison and then the contrastive viewpoints. Let's look at each of these in detail. The body of your essay should be objective. Avoid the temptation to insert personal opinion or refer to something in a derogatory manner or say you have an opinion about it or disagree with it. So that if you do have an opinion or if you do want to present something as having seemed to have more evidence for it than something else, then the conclusion is the proper place to do it, but not the body. So the first part of this is, what is the older secular viewpoint on your chosen topic? Again, third time I'm reminding you, please do not discuss old earth creationist viewpoint, gap theory, day-age theory, progressive creationism, etc. These are all old earth creationist viewpoints. So they're an attempt to interpret the Bible as seeming to have millions of years in the verses of Genesis between them. So do not discuss those. We're discussing the young earth viewpoint. Okay, the body of the essay, young earth view. What is the young earth viewpoint? Discuss both biblical and scientific evidence. So common error for students is omitting the scientific evidence for the young earth position, thus perpetuating the myth that the old earth view is scientific and the young earth view is religious. Actually, both views, the young earth view and the old earth naturalistic view, are both based on belief systems. So the old earth view is a belief system that everything in the universe can be explained by natural means, by the laws of science and physics. And the young earth viewpoint, of course, has the belief based in the Bible. But they both do look at the same evidence, they just come to different conclusions. And so that's the approach you'll take. All right, the body of the essay, comparison of viewpoints and contrastive viewpoints. Given the topic and significantly different viewpoints, it's likely that more content will appear in the contrast section than in the compare section. So, of course, we might expect to find more differences than similarities. So the contrast section, in most cases, will be the longest section of the paper. All right, and then finally in the conclusion, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. The conclusion, you're providing a summary statement. Be sure to restate your purpose or thesis statement. Do not introduce new material. Don't all of a sudden incorporate new evidence into the conclusion. You may and should use a sentence or two to express your opinion. However, do so without using I, or me, or my, or us, or we. So let me finish our comparative essay webinar this evening by reminding you of a great promise that God gives us. All hard work brings a profit. The mere talk leads only to poverty. So writing is hard work, and studying and achieving academic success is hard work. So let me encourage you that God promises you it will bring you a profit. So that concludes our webinar. Please refer any specific questions you have about your comparative essay to your instructor. If you had any problems viewing this webinar, feel free to send me an email at tbruner, TBREUNER, @liberty.edu. Thanks, and God bless.